She had exactly $3 to her name when she was handed the keys to a crumbling, abandoned mansion. Homeless at 18, she thought the ruined house was a cruel joke. Instead, what she uncovered behind its rotting walls would threaten a town's darkest secrets and change her life forever. The rain in Portland, Oregon was unforgiving, slicing through the thin nylon of Chloe Gallagher's jacket as she huddled in the corner booth of a 24-hour diner. At 18 years old, Chloe was officially a ghost in the system. Having aged out of the state's foster care program exactly 3 weeks ago, she had quickly learned how fast the world forgets you. The diner's night waitress, a sympathetic woman named Brenda, had allowed Chloe to sit with a single, lukewarm cup of black coffee for the past 4 hours, but the morning rush was approaching. Chloe knew she would soon have to face the freezing streets once more. She stared out the greasy window, mentally counting the coins in her pocket. $3.40. Not enough for a bus ticket, barely enough for a hot meal. As she picked up her backpack, the diner's bell chimed. A man in a tailored charcoal trench coat stepped out of the downpour. He did not look like a local, nor did he look like he belonged in a run-down roadside diner at 5 in the morning. His sharp eyes scanned the room and locked onto Chloe. He approached her booth, shaking the rainwater from his umbrella. "Chloe Gallagher," he asked, his voice low and authoritative. Chloe stiffened her hand instinctively, tightening around the strap of her backpack. "Who's asking?" "My name is David Croft. I'm a private investigator, hired by the estate of Arthur Pendleton," the man said, sliding a thick, cream-colored envelope across the sticky Formica table. "I've been looking for you for 2 weeks. It wasn't easy tracking you down after you left the Youth Transition Center." Chloe stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "Arthur Pendleton. I don't know anyone by that name." "He was your great-uncle on your mother's side." Croft explained, his tone strictly professional, but carrying a hint of unexpected pity. "He passed away last month. As his only living relative, you are the sole beneficiary of his estate, specifically a property located in the town of Oakhaven, Washington. Inside this envelope are the deed, the keys, and a prepaid train ticket. I suggest you use it." Before Chloe could process the absurdity of the situation, Croft tipped his hat, turned on his heel, and walked out into the rain. She sat in stunned silence, her trembling fingers finally reaching out to tear the envelope open. A heavy brass key fell onto the table with a solid clink, followed by legal documents bearing her name and a ticket departing for Oakhaven at noon. She wasn't just a homeless teenager anymore. She was a home owner. 6 hours later, Chloe stepped off the train into a town that looked like it had been trapped in time and left to rot. Oakhaven was a grim, depressed lumber town, nestled deep in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains. A persistent, heavy fog clung to the tops of the towering pine trees, and the few locals on the street hurried past her, with heads bowed against the damp chill. Following the directions provided in Croft's paperwork, Chloe walked for 2 miles toward the edge of town, where the paved road surrendered to cracked gravel. She finally stood before 88 Ashwood Lane. Calling it a house felt like a severe exaggeration. It was a sprawling 3-story Victorian monstrosity that was losing a long, bitter war with nature. Thick, thorny vines choked the wraparound porch. Half of the windows were boarded up or shattered, and the slate roof sagged dangerously under the weight of decades of neglect. It looked like a haunted house from a cheap horror movie, exuding a palpable sense of decay and isolation. As Chloe cautiously stepped onto the rotting wooden stairs of the porch, a sleek, black, luxury sedan slowly rolled up the gravel driveway. The engine cut off, and a man in a sharply pressed suit stepped out, his polished leather shoes crunching against the stones. He had slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "You must be the Gallagher girl," the man said, adjusting his silk tie. "I'm Gregory Simmons, Oak Haven's property attorney. I handled your great-uncle's meager affairs locally. I didn't think you'd actually show up." "Why wouldn't I?" Chloe asked, immediately distrustful of the man's oily demeanor. "Look at this place, kid." Simmons laughed, gesturing to the ruined estate. "It's a tear-down, a liability. The property taxes alone will drown you, and the structure is condemned. But because I respected old Arthur, I'm willing to do you a massive favor. I have $10,000 in cash in my car right now. Sign the deed over to me, and you can take the next train back to civilization with a heavy wallet." $10,000. To a girl with $3 in her pocket, it was a fortune. It was a fresh start, an apartment food. But Chloe hadn't survived the foster system by being gullible. If a wealthy slick attorney was waiting in the driveway of a ruined house to offer a homeless girl cash on the spot, the property was worth a lot more than $10,000. "No, thank you," Chloe said firmly, lifting her chin. "I think I'll keep it." Simmons's fake smile instantly vanished, replaced by a sneer that made Chloe's blood run cold. "You're making a monumental mistake, little girl. This town doesn't take kindly to outsiders poking around in the dirt. You won't last a week in that rotting coffin." Without another word, he got back into his sedan and sped away, leaving a cloud of gravel dust in his wake. Using the heavy brass key, Chloe unlocked the front door. The hinges screamed in protest as she pushed it open. The smell of mildew, stale air, and rotting paper hit her like a physical blow. The interior was a labyrinth of junk. Mountains of yellowed newspapers, broken antique furniture, and strange rusted mechanical parts were piled to the ceiling. Her great-uncle hadn't just been a recluse, he had been a massive hoarder. As night fell, the house plunged into an oppressive, suffocating darkness. Chloe set up her sleeping bag in the only clear space she could find, a dusty patch of floor in the front parlor. The house seemed to come alive in the dark. The floorboards groaned, the wind howled through the broken windows, and a chilling draft swept through the halls. Around midnight, Chloe jolted awake. It wasn't the wind. She heard the distinct, deliberate crunch of heavy footsteps, pacing slowly across the gravel driveway outside. She held her breath, watching a tall shadow eclipse the moonlight streaming through the parlor window. Someone was out there watching the house, and they knew she was inside. Morning broke with a pale, anemic light that barely managed to penetrate the grime-caked windows of the parlor. Chloe woke up shivering, her breath visible in the frigid air of the ruined mansion. Her muscles ached from sleeping on the hard hardwood floor, but the lingering terror of the previous night's pacing shadow pushed her exhaustion aside. Gregory Simmons's desperate cash offer and the midnight prowler proved one thing: there was something in this house that someone powerful wanted. And if Arthur Pendleton was hoarding a secret, Chloe was determined to find it before they did. She spent the first few hours methodically navigating the ground floor, carving narrow walkways through the towering walls of junk. It was an overwhelming task. There were broken grandfather clocks, stacks of moth-eaten rugs, and endless cardboard boxes filled with worthless trinkets. However, as she pushed deeper into the house, reaching what used to be a grand library at the rear of the estate, the nature of the hoard began to shift. The trash gave way to deliberate organization. Here the boxes weren't filled with junk. They were packed with meticulously labeled manila folders, financial ledgers, and architectural blueprints. Chloe wiped the dust off a heavy mahogany desk sitting in the center of the room. On it lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Arthur's frantic, cramped handwriting. Chloe flipped through the brittle pages. Arthur wasn't rambling. He was investigating. The entries detailed decades of suspicious local real estate transactions, sudden municipal budget deficits, and untraceable bank transfers. One name appeared on almost every page, circled in red ink: Mayor Richard Buckley. Other prominent local figures were listed alongside him, including Judge Thomas Montgomery and the town's chief of police. Arthur believed that the town's elite had systematically drained millions of dollars from Oak Haven's public works and pension funds over 30 years, funneling the money into offshore accounts. He was trying to expose them, Chloe whispered to the empty room, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. But where was the actual proof? The journal was just a collection of theories and observations. If Arthur had hard evidence, he would have hidden it well. Chloe examined the library closely. The room was dominated by a massive built-in oak bookshelf that covered the entire back wall. It was sagging under the weight of hundreds of decaying encyclopedias, but something about its placement felt wrong to Chloe's sharp eyes. The heavy dust on the floor stopped abruptly about 2 inches from the base of the shelf, leaving a clean curved arc on the hardwood, a scratch mark. The bookshelf was designed to swing open. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, Chloe grabbed a rusted crowbar she had spotted earlier in the kitchen. She wedged the iron bar beneath the base of the massive shelf and threw her entire body weight against it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening screech of metal grinding against wood, the heavy bookshelf gave way, swinging outward on hidden heavy-duty hinges. Behind the shelf was a small alcove, completely bare, except for a thick, rotting Persian rug on the floor. Chloe pulled the rug aside, coughing as a cloud of ancient dust plumed into the air. Beneath it lay the mismatched, uneven floorboards. In the center was a heavy iron ring lying flush against the wood. It was a trap door. She gripped the freezing iron ring with both hands, planting her feet firmly, and pulled with all her might. The heavy hatch resisted, sealed tight by years of neglect, but finally popped open with a loud crack. A wave of stale, freezing air rushed up from the black void below, carrying the sharp scent of ozone and dry earth. Chloe peered into the darkness. A narrow, steep set of concrete stairs descended into a sub-basement that certainly had not been listed on Croft's legal deed. Retrieving a half-dead flashlight from her backpack, Chloe clicked it on and slowly descended into the abyss. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom of the stairs, the weak beam of her flashlight swept across a hidden bunker. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic mess upstairs. This room was immaculate, dry, and highly organized. Against the far wall sat a massive, combination-locked, steel safe, flanked by 4 towering, fireproof file cabinets. Chloe approached the first file cabinet and pulled the top drawer open. It wasn't locked. Inside were rows of perfectly pristine, categorized folders. She pulled out the thickest one, labeled simply, "The Buckley Ledger, Pension Fraud, 1998 to 2015. She opened the folder and shined her dying flashlight on the documents. Her breath hitched. These weren't theories. They were original bank statements, signed contracts, and explicitly incriminating internal memos bearing Mayor Buckley's signature. There were photographs of clandestine meetings and offshore account numbers holding millions of stolen municipal funds. Arthur Pendleton hadn't just discovered the corruption. He had stolen the perpetrator's original documents. He had possessed the power to put the entire town leadership in federal prison for the rest of their lives. Suddenly, a massive splintering crash echoed from the floor above. Chloe froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. The sound of shattered wood was followed by the heavy, aggressive thud of boots kicking the front door off its hinges. "Tear the place apart," a voice barked from upstairs. It was Gregory Simmons, the slick attorney, and he wasn't alone. "Find the old man's office. Buckley wants those files today, or we burn this whole rotting structure to the ground with whoever is inside it." "You sure the girl is here?" Another voice grunted, a local thug by the heavy, unrefined tone. "I don't care if she is Bobby," Simmons snapped. "If she gets in the way, make her disappear. Just find the hidden room." Down in the pitch-black bunker, Chloe quickly clicked off her flashlight, plunging herself into total darkness. She was trapped underground with the most dangerous secrets in Oakhaven, and the men who had come to bury them had just walked through the front door. Down in the pitch-black bunker, Chloe's instincts took over. She had spent the last 3 years avoiding predatory foster parents, aggressive street gangs, and cynical social workers. She knew how to disappear. Her hands flew over the open file drawer in the dark, her fingers desperately grabbing thick stacks of documents. She shoved the Buckley ledgers, the offshore bank statements, and the internal memos into her canvas backpack, cramming them down until the zipper threatened to split. Above her, the heavy footsteps stomped across the parlor floorboards, moving systematically toward the back of the house. "Check the kitchen," Gregory Simmons shouted, his voice muffled by the thick wood separating the floors. "Bobby, you take the library. Old Arthur spent all his time in that miserable room. There has to be a safe, a lockbox, something. If the girl is hiding, drag her out by her hair." Chloe hoisted the heavy backpack onto her shoulders, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She clicked her dying flashlight back on, shielding the beam with her fingers to create a narrow sliver of illumination. She couldn't go back up the stairs. They would be waiting for her. She swept the faint beam across the bunker's concrete walls, searching for another way out. Arthur Pendleton had been a deeply paranoid man who had spent decades collecting evidence against ruthless, powerful people. A man that paranoid would never build a bunker with only one exit. Behind the towering fireproof cabinets, the beam caught a subtle irregularity in the concrete foundation. It was a heavy, rusted iron grate covering a narrow drainage pipe that sloped sharply downward into the earth. It looked like an old Prohibition-era bootlegging tunnel or an abandoned municipal sewer line barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. A loud, triumphant shout echoed from the library above. "Mr. Simmons, look at the floor here." Bobby's rough voice boomed down the stairs. "The dust is wiped clean. The whole damn bookshelf is on hinges." Panic spiked in Chloe's chest. She lunged behind the cabinets and grabbed the iron grate. It was heavy and fused with decades of rust. She braced her boots against the concrete wall and pulled with every ounce of strength her malnourished frame could muster. The rusted bolts groaned, flaking orange dust into her eyes, but it wouldn't budge. Above her, the heavy oak bookshelf screeched as it was pulled completely open. "Well, well, well," Simmons sneered. "Look what the crazy old bat was hiding. Go down there, Bobby. Shoot anything that moves." Driven by pure, unadulterated terror, Chloe grabbed the heavy, rusted crowbar she had brought down with her. She wedged the flat edge beneath the grate and threw her weight onto the handle. With a sharp metallic snap, the old iron bolts sheared off. The grate clattered heavily to the bunker floor, sounding like a gunshot in the confined space. "Hey!" Bobby yelled from the top of the concrete stairs. The blinding beam of a high-powered tactical flashlight pierced the gloom of the bunker. "She's down here." Chloe scrambled into the tight, muddy tunnel, head first, dragging her heavy backpack behind her. The air inside the pipe was suffocatingly foul-smelling of rotting leaves and stagnant water. She scrambled forward on her elbows and knees, scraping her skin against the rough, jagged concrete. Behind her, Bobby's heavy boots hit the bunker floor. "She's in the wall." She found a drain pipe. A deafening roar filled the tunnel as Bobby fired a massive handgun blindly into the opening. The bullet ricocheted wildly off the concrete, just inches from Chloe's leg, showering her in sharp stone shrapnel. She bit back a scream, pushing herself faster, crawling like a terrified animal through the suffocating darkness. The tunnel angled sharply to the left, taking her out of the line of fire. She heard Simmons cursing loudly in the bunker, demanding Bobby go in after her, but the large thug refused to wedge his massive frame into the narrow pipe. Chloe crawled for what felt like an eternity, her muscles burning her breath, coming in ragged, desperate gasps. The tunnel was flooding with icy rainwater, seeping in from the soil above. Just as her strength began to entirely give out, she felt a rush of freezing, fresh air against her face. She pushed through a thick tangle of dead blackberry bushes and tumbled out of the drainage pipe, landing heavily in the muddy ditch of the forest floor. She had emerged in the dense, towering pine woods behind the estate. The rain was coming down in sheets, washing the mud and blood from her face. Looking back toward the house, she saw the beams of multiple flashlights sweeping across the trees. Simmons had called for backup. There were at least half a dozen men combing the property. She couldn't stay in the woods. They had dogs, or they would soon. Shielding her backpack beneath her thin nylon jacket, Chloe sprinted into the tree line, navigating by the faint glow of the distant highway. She ran for nearly 3 miles, her lungs burning her torn shoes, slipping in the deep mud. Eventually the trees broke, revealing a desolate neon-lit truck stop sitting on the edge of the county line. Dripping wet, covered in dirt and bleeding from several scrapes, Chloe pushed through the glass doors of the gas station. The elderly clerk behind the counter stared at her in shock. "Please," Chloe gasped, leaning heavily against a rack of chips. "I need to use your phone. It's an emergency." She reached into her soaked pocket and pulled out the business card David Croft had given her at the diner the previous morning. She dialed the number with trembling, numb fingers. The phone rang 3 times before the private investigator answered. "Croft." His deep voice resonated over the line. "It's Chloe Gallagher," she whispered, keeping her eyes frantically locked on the parking lot outside. "You were right. The house, it's a trap. Arthur had evidence, decades of it. Embezzlement, pension fraud, municipal kickbacks involving Mayor Buckley and Gregory Simmons. They audited the town's funds through dummy corporations disguised as local contractors. I have the original ledgers, but Simmons and his men are trying to kill me." There was a tense, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Chloe listened to me very carefully. Croft said, his tone entirely dropping its detached professionalism, replaced by urgent military precision. "Do not go to the Oak Haven police. Chief Mitchell is on Buckley's payroll. Where are you right now?" "The Route 9 truck stop, about 3 miles west of the property. I am exactly 20 minutes away. Hide in the women's restroom. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. I'm bringing federal agents." Before Chloe could reply, the bright headlights of an Oak Haven police cruiser swept across the front windows of the gas station. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their hands resting ominously on their holstered weapons. They were looking for her. Chloe dropped the payphone receiver, her heart plummeting into her stomach. She ducked beneath the height of the front windows, crawling frantically toward the back of the store. The heavy glass doors slid open, and the heavy boots of the corrupt officers squeaked against the wet linoleum floor. "Hey, Pops!" one of the officers drawled to the terrified elderly clerk. "We're looking for a runaway teenager. Skinny dark hair, probably covered in mud. You seen anyone matching that description?" The clerk hesitated, his eyes darting nervously toward the aisles, but before he could speak, Chloe bolted. She kicked open the fire exit at the back of the store, setting off a blaring alarm. She sprinted into the heavy rain, but her exhausted legs betrayed her. As she rounded the corner of the building, a massive hand grabbed the collar of her jacket, violently yanking her backward. She slammed into the brick wall, the breath knocked out of her lungs. It was Bobby. The thug grinned down at her, rain dripping from his nose. "Slippery little rat," he grunted, snatching the heavy canvas backpack from her shoulders. "Mr. Simmons is going to be very happy." A black luxury sedan pulled up to the alleyway, its tires splashing through the deep puddles. Gregory Simmons rolled down the passenger window, his face pale with fury, but his eyes gleaming with greedy triumph as Bobby tossed the soaked backpack into the car. "Put her in the trunk, Bobby," Simmons ordered coldly. "We're taking a drive out to the old abandoned quarry. It's a shame the poor homeless Gallagher girl had a tragic hiking accident on her first day in town." Bobby grabbed Chloe's arm, ignoring her screams and kicks. He dragged her toward the rear of the sedan. She fought wildly, clawing at his face, but he was simply too strong. He popped the trunk and lifted her off the ground. Suddenly, a blinding barrage of high-beam headlights illuminated the alleyway. 3 massive, unmarked black SUVs roared into the truck stop parking lot, effectively blocking Simmons's sedan and the police cruiser. The doors of the SUVs flew open simultaneously. Over a dozen men in tactical gear wearing windbreakers, emblazoned with the bright yellow letters FBI, swarmed the vehicles. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Step away from the girl," a voice commanded over a booming megaphone. Bobby froze, dropping Chloe onto the wet asphalt. He raised his hands in the air. The 2 corrupt Oak Haven police officers rushed out of the back of the gas station, but upon seeing the federal tactical team, they immediately surrendered, tossing their sidearms onto the ground. From the lead SUV, David Croft stepped out. He wasn't wearing his tailored trench coat anymore. He was wearing a Kevlar vest. Beside him stood a stern-looking man who flashed a gold badge. "Gregory Simmons," the man announced, approaching the driver's side of the sedan. "I'm Special Agent William Bradley, FBI Anti-Corruption Task Force. You are under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, racketeering, and the attempted murder of a federal witness." Simmons looked completely panicked, his slick demeanor entirely shattered. "This is a mistake. You have no jurisdiction here. I am a respected attorney." "Save it for the judge," Agent Bradley replied coldly, pulling Simmons roughly from the vehicle and throwing him against the hood to cuff him. "And you might want to know that Mayor Buckley and Judge Montgomery are currently being pulled out of their beds in handcuffs as we speak." David Croft walked over to Chloe, gently helping her up from the freezing puddles. He retrieved her soaked backpack from the front seat of the sedan and handed it back to her. "You did good, kid," Croft said, a rare, genuine smile crossing his face. "Arthur hired me to watch over his estate, but he also warned me about what was hidden inside. He knew they would come for you. He just needed someone brave enough to find the evidence and draw them out. Over the next 6 months, the town of Oak Haven was torn apart and completely restructured. The files Chloe had pulled from the bunker provided the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission with a mountain of undeniable proof. The corruption network was dismantled, resulting in 32 indictments. Millions of dollars in stolen municipal funds, routed through fake accounts, modeled on complex offshore schemes reminiscent of notorious historical frauds, were seized and returned to the town's public works. But Arthur Pendleton had saved one final secret exclusively for his great niece. When federal investigators finally brought heavy machinery in to crack the massive steel safe located in the sub-basement of the ruined mansion, they expected to find more evidence. Instead, the safe was completely filled with perfectly preserved legitimate bearer bonds, gold bullion, and a stack of stock certificates representing Arthur's entirely legal, fiercely guarded personal fortune. On top of the wealth sat a handwritten letter addressed to Chloe. It explained that he had purposely let the house decay to keep the corrupt town officials completely uninterested in the property while he built his case. The fortune, valued at over $8 million, was his gift to her, a reward for surviving the cruelty of the foster system and for having the courage to fight back. Chloe Gallagher never had to sleep in a freezing diner ever again. She didn't sell the property on Ashwood Lane. Instead, Using her newfound wealth, she hired the best architects and contractors in the state. She meticulously restored the towering Victorian mansion, transforming it from a rotting, haunted eyesore into a magnificent, sprawling estate. She opened its doors as a private, fully funded sanctuary and transition center for teenagers aging out of the state foster system, ensuring that no kid in Oak Haven would ever have to face the cold streets alone. She had arrived in town as a homeless ghost with $3 to her name, but she remained there as the fierce, unyielding guardian of Arthur Pendleton's true legacy. Did Chloe's incredible transformation from a homeless teenager to a fearless millionaire give you chills? Her bravery in taking down a corrupt empire proves that true strength often comes from those the world overlooks. If you were captivated by this intense story of mystery survival and ultimate justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends to spread this jaw-dropping tale, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, real-life inspired stories.